So, the Nikki devs finally made a statement. It's been a long 3 weeks since the version 1.5 update dropped, and 2 weeks since I made my first video about the issues. It feels like it's been longer. Infold's silence has been deafening, especially because as time passed, even more widespread issues came to light. It's been hard to imagine what the company could possibly do to fix this, but at the same time, it seemed impossible that they would completely ignore it. That would have been the worst thing they could do. Now that they've finally spoken up, let's see whether they've actually addressed any of the problems this time. If you want to understand the context, please go watch my previous video first. I won't revisit all the details, but before we get to their statement, let's quickly list the issues which were covered. Before the update, there was the wishlist issue, where they tried to rug pull the rewards, though at least that one was addressed at the time. The original opening to the game was deleted and replaced with a confusing mess. Most people consider that a retcon, though some are adamant that it doesn't count. Either way, this was just an awful decision. The game also had an insane number of game-breaking bugs, with many people unable to log in, many others effectively unable to play, and pretty much everyone experiencing broken UIs, stuttering, and other constant minor bugs. My fancy fireworks dress is still broken, and customer service has ignored my messages. The monetization changes were awful too. The dying feature turned out to be stupidly expensive, the new outfits increased the gacha pity by 20 pulls, and they also introduced a purchasable bathtub with a fake discount label, which is illegal in many countries. And finally, they reduced the frequency of the endgame rewards. This particular complaint was addressed in their initial apology, mostly, though it still provides a little less than had been promised at first. Players have been responding to this via a boycott, renamed a girlcott after the original term was banned from many official forums. This started off fairly mild, but people intended to step it up over time. The final stage, which was planned for this week, was for everyone to stop logging in at all. If that didn't get a response, many planned to just give up and quit the game entirely. One that I had missed originally is that version 1.5 added a time-limited event providing bonus rewards for people who spend real-world money on the game, which was not announced in advance. Many people were upset because they had just spent money buying things in anticipation for the new update. In version 1.4, there were some time-limited bundles people could buy at a discount, a real one this time, which were due to expire when the version changed, so many who enjoyed the game decided to go ahead and stock up in anticipation of the new content. After the update, with the sudden reveal of the extra rewards for spending, all those people had to either spend more or miss out on those extra rewards from the new spending event. If they had known in advance, they may have decided to hold back on their purchases for a few days, but instead we were kept in the dark. It's hard to see any way to interpret this as anything other than cynical greed on the part of Infold. The idea that they might have added this event without advance planning just doesn't seem realistic, and by not announcing the event, they created this situation where some people will feel compelled to spend more than they had originally intended. And another, which I had been unaware of, is the dyeing feature has serious issues as well. Many collars are inaccurate. The underlying collar of the clothes is often somewhat visible through the color of the dyes, and in some cases, palettes which are supposed to be one color look completely different to what you'd expect. Green swatches looking blue, red looking hot pink, and so on. More concerning, the item collars that are shown in the preview page where you actually buy the palettes and apply them to your outfit sometimes do not match what they look like when you use them in the open world. This hasn't happened to me personally, but if the screenshots I've seen are accurate, they make it pretty clear that this is not just a lighting issue. This may be something which only affects specific hardware, but either way, for those affected, it's a big disappointment, especially considering all those layers of monetization people have to navigate in order to buy a swatch in the first place. When something is that expensive, we have to expect better. Much more concerning than either of those is the currency disappearing from people's accounts. This first started happening due to a bug which allowed people to collect more of one currency from the new area, which was supposed to be available in limited amounts per day. This currency is used to unlock the miracle outfit and was time-gated so that it should take months to collect all the pieces. Some people encountered a bug which let them collect the daily rewards twice, though they had no idea it was a bug until Infold immediately released the patch which fixed that issue and removed the extra currency they had collected, even if it put their balance into negatives. Funny to see their priorities there. Shortly afterwards, people started reporting that they were losing other similar in-game currencies, and then people noticed that it began to happen with the really important one, diamonds, this game's premium currency, and not small amounts either. There's no way for me to tell whether these posts were caused by an actual bug or were just due to chargebacks or other transaction issues, but there were many people claiming this happened to them, often despite being free to play or just not having spent it all on the recent banners. Given all the issues around the game, at this point, most people are inclined to believe this kind of accusation. And since very few people actively keep track of their exact currency numbers, that is not a good suspicion to have lurking in everyone's minds. While Infold were ignoring the outcry, they did continue posting promotional content on their social media. Photo challenges, for example, where players submit photos in the hopes of winning prizes. Obviously, those kinds of things will be run by people whose entire job is to handle marketing, but it just leaves a really bad taste. And in addition, while players were actively leaving negative reviews on places like Steam, tanking the game's score, many spotted some really suspicious reviews. Even with just a cursory investigation, it was very clear these were bot accounts paid to give a positive review to prevent the score from plummeting further. Not a good look at all. And finally, there has been ongoing concern about how all of the technical issues have impacted people who bought the monthly Diamond subscription. You can pay a $5 a month to get some premium currency, which appears in your account the first time you log in every day. If you don't log in, you don't get the currency, hence why these subscriptions are usually more reasonably priced. They increase engagement and build up the habit of logging in daily. Many people had an active subscription, but were unable to log in because the game was so utterly broken. They reached out to Infold's customer support, asking for confirmation that once the issues were fixed, anyone who had missed out on their diamonds would be compensated. In recent days, customer service finally replied and said that this was not going to happen and that if it happened in the future, the player should just log in on another device. This is also likely illegal in some countries. The subscription counts as a contract, and if Infold are unable to provide the service that the customer has purchased, it is on them to fix that, not the player. Many people don't have another device which could run the game, so this response is unacceptable. So what did they actually say now that they have finally broken their silence? I'll skip past the apologies and acknowledgements of the fanbase's supposedly unwavering support for the game and focus on the actual substance. They mentioned some things which were pretty obvious to anyone, that their preparation for the launch of 1.5 was insufficient, and they are responsible for the issues and addressing them will remain a top priority for the team. As a result of this, they're delaying the release of the next update so that they can focus on stability and prevent similar issues from recurring. That's probably for the best, though really I don't think many people will particularly care about the new content until the problems with the existing direction have been addressed. They also specifically mentioned the issues with the co-op features and will be giving out 360 crystals to all players as compensation. Note that this is just an in-game currency that you can gain by playing the co-op mode, which can be spent on things like poses or some exclusive clothes. Next, they touched on the issues they have encountered throughout the development cycle, emphasized that these are issues which are unprecedented for their team, and said that they decided to tackle the problems first and only communicate with the fans once they have concrete solutions. I understand where that's coming from, but always think it would be a better approach to publicly acknowledge issues earlier on. Some people would be angry at the lack of clear solutions and feel that it's just empty words, but a large part of most people's frustration comes from the silence itself, emphasizing that while you don't have a solution yet, you're working on it and will share more when you have clear solutions would at least buy some extra time. Of course, for that to be palatable for the players, it would have required them to actually acknowledge all of the issues. Interestingly, while they kinda acknowledged how angry fans are over the removal of the original opening of the game, their statement on that is very awkwardly worded. Their statement focuses on the dress itself and assures us that the dress was never intended to be removed from the game. This may not be their intention here, but to me, this still reads as if the game's original opening is gone, and they just intend to smooth over the rough edges between the new one and the rest of the game. They also state that they were unable to properly refine the introduction due to technical hurdles. Frankly, that is no excuse. This isn't an early access title. Game companies should not release shoddy, half-finished work and try to pass it off as a quality product. People who have looked through the game's files have claimed that there were hints pointing towards a couple more major map expansions before the scope of the narrative would open up to the wider multiverse. It sure sounds like their leadership drastically changed plans, and this whole mess was the inevitable result. They also mentioned some future plans, new gameplay which is actually tested before it's released, performance and stability fixes, and so on, but they led that part by saying they're expanding their cumulative top-up rewards. In other words, yet more monetization. It feels utterly bizarre that they've included this. I've seen some speculation that it's due to some whales complaining that they don't get enough in exchange for their support, while others think that it could be due to a misunderstanding of the complaints around the spending event that I mentioned earlier. But either way, an apology letter is not the time to announce new incentives for players to throw money at them. They ask for our patience and trust, but at this point, I don't think there's much of that left. They also announced a new initiative which will provide a new way for them to collect player feedback. It's unclear why this would be necessary, given that they already have customer support channels built into the game itself, plus a regular survey system with free text inputs for open feedback, and customer support via email as well. Maybe they really are looking to create a feedback cycle which is more meaningful, but many people understandably feel that this is just a way to redirect frustrated players away from more public forums. At first glance, it doesn't look all that great. The in-game form has a limit of mere 500 characters. You can send the feedback in via email instead, but considering the scale of the issues, that limit is a really odd decision. Maybe that's just an oversight caused by copying the code from somewhere else. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And finally, they did announce some extra compensation. 120 diamonds per day for 8 days. 8 pulls. Not even a full 10 pull. Personally, I don't care all that much about the size of the compensation offered for its own sake. I want an open acknowledgement of the issues and for them to share a clear path towards fixing all of them. However, in this kind of situation, the size of the compensation is a very clear signal for how seriously they take the complaints. Giving out so little is not a good look. And worse, the way this is worded implies that we'll have to log into the game on each of those 8 days in order to receive the compensation. That's bad enough at the best of times. Right now, it comes across as an attempt to break the girlcott and get people back in the habit of logging in every day. It also feels important to highlight that a mere hour after posting this apology on their Twitter, they followed up with 8 posts about the outfits in the upcoming banners. This makes the apology look far from genuine. There's absolutely nothing about it which suggests that it could not have been posted a day earlier, for example, which would have let it stand at the top of their profile for what would feel like a bare minimum amount of time before it got buried under all the new screenshots. While these are probably scheduled posts, that really is no excuse, and this feels like yet another subtle way the company are trying to bury the situation and act like everything's totally normal. As you can see, there is a lot that they did not address. Their point on the retcon was confusing at best, and aside from that, they mostly focused on the bugs and some promises to do better in the future. They didn't mention the biggest complaints many of us had: the increase to pity, the awful monetization of the dying feature, the fake discount, the endgame rewards, the spending event, or even the disappearing currency and the poor response it garnered from their customer support team. Even if they fix the plague of bugs and smooth over the weird transition between the new opening and the rest of the game, and add the original outfit to the story somewhere later on, this is far from what fans are demanding, and it's nowhere near enough for people to feel that it's a viable compromise. And that's ignoring the mildly insulting way they seem to have set up the compensation to be such a low amount distributed only if you log in for a week straight. It also bears highlighting that several of the points here are explicitly against laws in numerous countries, and there is even more than that which is illegal as well. There's a post on the subreddit by SpiderB8 which covers this in great detail, and if you're curious, it's well worth reading. I've included the link in the description. For example, it mentions the hidden drop rates. People have long suspected that hairs and dresses are far less likely to drop than the less desirable items, ensuring that on average, people have to spend more to get the more valuable items. Apparently, a data miner discovered the code which set those drop rates, which put hair and dresses at a little over 4%, shoes and socks at 9.5%, and accessories at almost 14%. This is exactly the kind of hidden weights to tip the odds which have been explicitly regulated against in several countries, and it's absolutely wild if Infold are really doing this, or any of the other things they're accused of doing. This long overdue announcement was, unfortunately, inadequate. There's a huge gulf between what Infold are trying to do and what the fans feel would be acceptable, even for the parts that the company have addressed, and the vast majority of the issues that the fans care the most about were not mentioned at all. I also continue to find it a bit annoying that they're communicating this as from the dev team. This is a leadership issue, and the management themselves should take ownership and discuss this publicly. Sadly, there's clearly nobody there who can hold them accountable. I guess it's up to fans to keep protesting, to keep raising awareness, and to keep demanding that the company change their ways. If they keep ignoring us, then sadly, this game will not last much longer. Until next time.